Good morning, everyone. This is Kevin Robbins, CEO of Mid-Atlantic Employers, and I thank you for joining us for our weekly webinar. As you can see by our title, we're still going to address the kind of COVID-19 related issues that are still very active, and at the end of the session, Amy McAndrew will do that. But as we're working with our members and others, we're all really focused on, how do we get back to where we need to be? And that recovery is one aspect, but it's growth. And you'll, see our tagline, acclimate, integrate, accelerate. We're finding that all of us really need to take just an inventory of everything we're doing around people process to make sure that, we're really sensitive to what may have changed and what to do with it. The simple example, I was talking to somebody the other week about onboarding and well, even though we have our onboarding steps, what does it look like when we're onboarding virtually? How do we create that bonding and rapport? What are things that we can do? So over the next couple of weeks, we're going to focus on different aspects of the people process and really give you some things to think about and things to be cautious of, and so that you can, better help your company get to where we're talking about the growth that we all look to get back onto. So it's a new normal. Some people are saying it's the next normal, that this is what it's going to be. And I think certainly for a while, we're going to be in this state, and our focus is to embrace it and not to run away from it. So our hope is that you'll continue to join us for these free weekly webinars where we share kind of insight with you. Okay, and the next slide. Next week, the same time, feel like the same bat channel for those of you who are my age, same time, same bat channel. Sienna Williams, MEA's attorney, is going to discuss another very, kind of topical subject, harassment and diversity inclusion programs. Really provide more in depth about what does it mean, what are we talking about, when, why now? Obviously, we see a lot in the press, but why now as employers, and more importantly, how to get started and what are some things to think about. So that'll be a very good program. Sienna's working with a lot of our members in this area. We've been experts on harassment training for many, many years, and I'm sure they'll be very thought-provoking, so I hope you can join us. Next slide. Again, just to remind everybody, if you are in Pennsylvania, you're required to have a health and safety plan. One of the requirements, it's included in the posting you do in your business, is to have a pandemic safety officer. We have now sold out 2 of those sessions, so we've added a third on July 27th. So if you are in Pennsylvania and have not yet taken this, we strongly encourage your PSO to join us. It's a 75-minute training, but open to both members and non-members. So like I said, it's a have to do at this point. So we strongly encourage, just so you're aware of what your responsibilities and things to look out for. Okay. And just a reminder, or for anyone new, after the event today, we will send you out the recording, so feel free to share with the others in your organization. We'll also send out the slide deck and any additional resources that are mentioned during the event. If you have any questions during the discussion, please put it into the Q&A or chat, and we will ask our speakers with time permitting. And again, for MEA members, we're here to support you whenever you need us, 24/7. So if anything comes up from this or any questions you have, feel free to reach out to the hotline or MEA legal support, which is included with membership, and you'll see the number and email there. Okay, so I'd like to, in a minute, turn it over to our first speaker. Like I said, we will have our legal update with Amy McAndrew at the end of this, and just a preview, it's going to be all things masks, because that seems to be the topic that everyone's concerned about these days. But we're going to start with one of our long-term partners, Rob Aldina for CarePlus Solutions. CarePlus is a national behavioral consulting firm that specializes in employee assistance programs. They are actually the oldest EAP organization in the country and have been a partner of ours for over 25 years. They do a fantastic job in this space for our members. Rob is the COO of CarePlus. He's a licensed clinical social worker, a frequent lecturer and adjunct professor in the social work area, as well as a frequent expert on TV and radio. And we've asked him to come share, what again, around EAP, what is going to be different that our employees are facing, and how does that impact the work environment, and what you as employers can do to help your employees, with managing their life and their business and their work with you. So Rob, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kevin. So let me move over. I guess they're going to set up the slides. I have to my slides. Okay. I don't see my slides. They introduce me.
Is Rob sharing his screen right now?
Not yet, Amy. You might have to stop sharing.
Okay. Okay, there you go.
Oh, great.
There you go. Okay, so first of all, good morning, and thank you to Kevin, Amy, Ben, and Susan. It's been a pleasure working many years. Thank you for Kevin going over what Care Plus Solutions are, who we are. Let me start with, again.
Sorry, Rob, you're not sharing your screen yet?
Okay, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, you let me know when.
Do you see a share screen button in the webinar?
Share screen button in the webinar. Let me see. Okay, we okay now?
Yep, you got it. Looks good.
Okay, great, great. Okay, so what we're going to cover today basically is working through mental health and the work challenges that the employees face, we face as leaders, and again, as we move to the different phases, managing the work site as people begin to return to work, to bring a sense of normalcy. One of the things I'm going to repeat a lot during this presentation is, what is the job? Because we are dealing with, of course, we have healthcare workers, first responders, who basically jobs haven't changed other than maybe overtime and what the rules they have to follow. But I'm talking about jobs more or less that have been working remotely, and the flexibility. So two things, flexibility and getting the job done are two very important things, okay? We talked about Care Plus Solutions. An EAP is basically an organization that helps employees that are having some type of personal problems, whether it be psychological, mental health, substance abuse, work life, which can be legal, financial, or it can be child care, elder care issues. Who's eligible would be the employees, their dependents, family members, and significant others. How does the program work? Well, our program has many avenues that a person can go to reach us, and that would be obviously 24-hour response line, emails, as well as going through our website on an inquiry basis. Okay, so having access in all those areas is very important for the success of your organization, because you want to encourage employees to contact us and contact whoever your EAP is. Okay, so what's happened so far? Where are we now? And where are we going next? Okay, what's happened so far, as you know, March 20th, the Governor Wolf basically had an order where everyone was quarantined, shutdown order, and obviously who followed New York, New Jersey was right in there. Since that time, that's we're going to talk about that. It's been many mixed emotions, but it's unprecedented. And they're really, although we're looking in the past with other pandemics, this is pretty much the first in modern times where we've had to deal with these restrictions. And that's important. Where are we going? And that's going to be, obviously, we're going to be going through phases, and people will be returning in some way to the workplace, and where we're going from there. Okay, so what I like to start with, when we do any type of change, and unfortunately a lot of times it could be a loss, we use the stages of grief. But that could also apply to a new computer system. For example, a denial of someone who's been working with a system for many years, and now a new system has been thrusted upon them. In denial, in grief, is the shock and not wanting to face the loss that they've had. Anger and resentment. Why did this happen? How did this happen? Bargaining is going to be. We're seeing a lot of bargaining. And I'll go over that with the COVID, but that's really sort of to make it go away, or say, you know, why did this happen? How could I have changed things? Which is a lot of times not helpful. And more or less people go through depression because now there's been a loss, and then we move towards acceptance. So let's relate this to the COVID. Again, denial was, people were fearful, so they were saying, well, this is not that bad. There was ranges from a big panic to this will go away in a couple of weeks. So there was a lot of that confusion and people being upset. And basically, anger comes in, because we're being forced to do things differently and not the way we used to do. And that could be very upsetting. And bargaining is maybe now it's been here for a while, maybe I can take some risks. And people are really struggling with this, the issues of what is going to be the lingering issues on a long-term basis, because this seems like things have changed for good in many ways. Working remotely was moving quickly in the workplace, but it's really accelerated, and we're not going to be going back to what we had. And also people realizing that they're depressed because I want to get back to seeing people. Is there going to be a vaccine? How is this going to go? And again, acceptance that there's a new reality, and how am I going to work with this? What are the new ways that I could make things positive? Okay. One of the, we've done our research. One of the researchers, Dr. Kimberly-Norris, a psychologist, put together these stages of isolation, which I think are very good. And again, we've talked about the confusion and the panic piece of it, and people reacting in many different ways. So that's pretty much the first phase. And how is this going to affect me? How is it going to change things for me? How can I still be productive? How can I deal with my employees, especially working remotely? So again, the reactions to the quarantine have been the stages of grief. We're going to go further with the isolation, but big challenges have been, and we're doing a lot of groups with our companies doing with Zoom and working with companies. Challenges parenting and co-parents and co-parenting. What we're seeing a lot is people, when is the assignments due? Because maybe one parent will work during the day, the other one at night if it's due in the morning. So there's a lot of co-parenting because Obviously, you know, childcare has been a major area that was hit, with the exception of now, I guess, individual babysitting is coming back, but the group babysitting really shut down. So the challenges of parenting and co-parenting have been good. Setting boundaries is very important. Where am I working? How do I set a boundary? Is there a place in my home? A time? How long am I working? For how long? And also a lot of loneliness and isolation. People that are living alone. There are people living alone, and what some studies have shown, there's been a surge in buying pets because if they don't have loved ones around. We are social beings, and we'll go through that more as we go along. So the honeymoon stage, what happened initially was I'm enjoying working from home. It's easier. I have a sense of freedom. I could pretty much make my own schedule. Saving money. It's a big savings. Gas, travel, vehicle, wear and tear. Saving time. Remember, most people's commute are anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half, but it could be up to 2 to 3 hours in some cases. So that is, and the fatigue that goes with that. So more time with the immediate family. It was unusual in the beginning for myself, and many others have shared that in our groups, that, you know, they've spent more time with their families, but then there's issues with, okay, where are you going to work? Where am I going to work? And setting boundaries and scheduling. Okay, so what is now, and we're over a period of time, Zoom meeting burnout. You know, there's been a lot of to replace meetings, Zoom meetings, and then there's some of the burnouts from that. You know, wanting to break away from this new routine is often an issue. Feeling frustrated when things go back to normal. You know, how am I going to feel? And again, and people are talking about, again, working harder, working more hours, having trouble with setting those boundaries. So that's going to be important for you as leaders to help people and be flexible, understanding, getting the work done. And also, I think because of the social being it's setting in, and I don't know, companies may start to do a once a week face-to-face meeting, limiting people in a conference room or anything, because there's a lot of studies that show how important that is, not to lose motivation. So what happens with the reunion stage? Fluctuating back and forth between anxiety and apprehension and excitement and relief. Hey, you want to get back? I kind of want to see the people I work with, but I'm afraid there's safety issues. What is the procedures my company's going to take to make sure my safety? Those are important things. What are they expecting of me? Is it going to be different? Will my employer understand my concerns with child care, health issues, and things of that nature? And what changes were thrusted upon me during this and with this continued pandemic? How can we best support our employees? That's going to be very important. How could we best support it? Listening is important. Flexibility is important. Setting boundaries, consistency, but really looking at, again, what in each individual job encompasses, what the functions are. It's much different from someone who's a computer tech to someone who is a healthcare worker. So you have to understand the limitations and work with the employee to get the work done and to make sure there's a sense of normalcy. And remember, everybody has different reactions. They may be more anxious. Some people have history of anxiety, depression. This may exacerbate that. So again, get them to the EAP. I think the most important thing to understand, and we already know this, it changes day to day. So therefore, staying close to your HR consultants at the MEA, speaking with all your support groups, including your EAP, is very important. So reach out, because things change day to day, and encourage people to reach out to their loved ones, just as you are, coworkers, to get that support, because we're all in this together. Here's an important one. Distinguish between evidence and the noise. You know, one of the things that there was a lot that came out, the self-care, and we're talking about here, nutrition, exercise. People say they have been exercising more, and that's important. Making sure you get enough rest, and that's important. Here's another important piece, and I do it. You got to limit your media input and certain media. My goodness, you could listen to one show and they'll be telling you one thing, and another news outlet will tell you something different. So it's a fine line. It's not easy, but that's important to use your common sense, communicate with your companies, because they're staying on top of it. And usually your companies will you should have frequent communication with your employees. And so that'll be enough, and not hear a lot of false news that's out there as far as because of the panic. And focus on what you can control. And as I said, self-care, whether it be meditation, I was talking to Kevin about massages, and whatever you can do safely is going to be key. So you stay energized. Very important for safety. Again, going back, follow those CDC guidelines, communicate with local and state officials. And again, it's when our fear gets a hold of us, we have a tendency to go off. We have to try to communicate with our employees and each other, and keep ourselves there, and utilize, again, the AP in any way. You know, everyone is unique. Everyone has different reactions, so that's going to be important. And, you know, we are seeing that with our groups. Some people are more concerned about issues such as childcare. Some people are more concerned about how they're going to get the job done. There's a lot of different reactions. So in summary, we're going to promote and encourage the AP services to employees. Contact your EAP or training for a presentation in any area. That's going to be contact the consultants on individual issues that come up. You know, this employee now confronted me with this need that they have of child care, or even elder care, or family. How do I deal with that? You're going to have to reach out to MEA and their legal team, and that's going to be important. Consistent communication, leadership by example, that's going to be, like it's always been, very important to give people a sense of security. Remember the hierarchy of needs, which is safety first. And when I guess you might have been in school with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, okay? Be mindful that we see permanent changes in the workplace. This is going to be, you know, there's going to be changes in where people work, how often they go into the office. These are discussions are going to be ongoing, and one thing may be different one day and may go back to what it was 2 days prior. So we have to understand that and be supportive of each other and continue that communication dialogue. That's pretty much it. I'm looking forward to questions, because again, with our groups, we get those individual situations that I think could, you know, really be complicated. And I want to thank everybody for allowing me this time.
Rob, that was great. I do have a couple questions for you that have come from our members quite a bit. The first one is, a lot of companies are trying to come back to physical locations where they can. And again, we're going to see the blended workforce virtual, but what do you suggest for a management group when some group of employees is really concerned about safety or something else and doesn't want to come back? How do you balance that respect for the individual needs versus kind of a business need to bring people together?
That's a tough one. I think every company, first of all, what was their fear? Is it just a fear and psychological that would go to the EAP to get them ready? Or is it they've been exposed? And then what are the guidelines? You know, the 14-day guideline after someone has tested positive and been treated, they've been clear for 14 days. A lot of companies are using that. So you have to take what they're, first of all, the first question that comes up, you want to listen and you want to hear what they have to say, but then you have to say to yourself, okay, the first thing is, can they get the job done and stay home? If that's very different than if they can't. And then if they, you can't get the job, then you have to figure out, whether their concern is legitimate in the sense of having exposure, or they need some help to start feeling comfortable being around people in a safe distance. Again, I see this all the time. I see three things, wearing a mask, staying 6 foot away, and keeping your hands clean and away from your face. I see that on billboards. So that's the guideline.
Okay. And then one final question, because again, I think this is something that's brewing out there and some people are doing. A lot of people now that they're working from home or virtually and that travel has been pretty much shut down aren't using PTO time. Okay. And I think it ties to the boundaries. And so what are some of the ideas you've seen companies do in terms of getting employees to take time off?
That's interesting, because I think that has to be enforced in some level, the way, in other words, 3 weeks of vacation a year. And I've been talking to more and more people that have been postponing that and seeing frustration with that, and people that are just in stay vacations, or a lot of people will find a place, a cabin in the woods that are whatever. But that, I really feel that, because I did it myself, took a week, I really feel that that has to be, and I'm seeing more companies being flexible to an extent, but I think more companies are going to move towards sticking with that, because it's very helpful. That's where vacation was designed in the first place, is that psychological relief. And I think companies right now, they're being flexible, but some of the companies I'm talking to are, for example, the rule was they had to use their vacation by the end of the year. They're allowing, out of the 3 weeks, 1 week to be carried over, but not the 2 weeks. And people are going to have to do stay vacations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think you're saying really encourage and in some ways have to push people to take time off, because you need it psychologically as well as business.
No question. Yeah. No question. And
Great.
people resent if you don't allow them, I think, over time. In the first place, they don't want to take it, but if you don't in some way encourage them, give them incentives, they're going to resent it, because they'll lose the vacation.
Great. Well, Rob, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Yep. And now we're going to turn it over to Amy for our weekly update. Amy?
All right. Thank you, Rob. That was great.
I'll mute. Thank you, Amy.
All right. So we've had a couple of developments over the last week or so, for anybody who was paying attention right before 4th of July. Obviously, we're in green. That's been the big discussion over the last couple of weeks. What does that mean? And you've heard me say this before. It's a little bit unfortunate that Governor Wolf has used red, yellow, and green, because everybody thinks green means go. It does not. We're still supposed to be using teleworking where we can. It shouldn't be a rush to get everybody back into the office right away. And you still must follow the business and building safety orders. Those all can be found on the Pennsylvania Department of Health's website. And big question, yes, masks are still required, but there was a development around masks, so we're going to talk about that too. But we did have one of our members gave us a request to ask this poll. And so I'm going to ask this question before I even delve into some of the new mask material. So I'm going to ask Ben to help me out and run this poll. But as a practical matter, if you're a Pennsylvania employer, what are you doing regarding masks for workers in cubicles? And if you don't have cubicles, assume that you have workers in something similar to a cubicle. So are you having them wear the masks regardless of the cubicle size? You're not having them wear the masks if they can meet certain social distancing requirements, or something else, and feel free to chat us in what that is. So if you can go ahead and vote for one of those, we can get some, you guys can share some information with each other, which would be great. Okay, so here we see. Got about a quarter of you saying that masks must be worn regardless of the cubicle size replacement. About 70% of you saying masks don't need to be worn if alone in the cubicle and you can meet social distancing. And then a couple of people said other. And in the chat, people are saying only put the mask on when you're traveling throughout the facility. Someone else saying, we're not even going back yet. We're staying off-site just as long as possible. So hopefully that's helpful to you as you sort of think about what you're doing. And I'm going to talk about masks a little bit more in a second, but Kevin alluded to this earlier. Who's your pandemic safety officer, right? If you're in Pennsylvania, you're required to designate a PSO. That's the person in your organization who is going to keep up to date and have all the information around safety and health related to COVID-19. I am the pandemic safety officer for MEA, and as Kevin said earlier, we are running PSO training for anyone who is interested. Okay, let's talk about a little bit more about masks. Okay, so Pennsylvania Department of Health came out with an order last week, July 1st, and this is what they're saying. It's slightly different than what we've heard before. Okay, if you're outside and social distancing not possible, and I should say this is not just for the workplace, this is for everyone in Pennsylvania, okay? If you're outside and social distancing is not possible, masks are required. If you're indoors, where members of the public generally are permitted, so a grocery store, a school potentially, masks are being required. If you are waiting for or getting on public transportation, masks are going to be required. And then specifically for working, so if you're working with the public, so retail, your grocery stores or retail stores, if you're involved in food preparation or packaging, you need to wear a mask. Where walking through common areas in the facility or interacting with others where social distancing is not possible. So this seems to suggest that if you're in a cubicle and you can maintain social distancing, that a mask would not be required. Now, remember, you as the employer can always dictate more be done than less, but this is what Pennsylvania is now telling us. Any exceptions? Well, obviously there's an exception around safety. So you've got employees who are engaging in type of work where they can't wear a mask. Some of the examples we've seen are folks working outside in the heat and humidity, performing really strenuous exercise. They should not be wearing masks. If there's a reasonable accommodation, so you've got an employee who has asthma or has anxiety and can't breathe with the mask on, that should be an interactive process under the Americans with Disabilities Act, determine if there's another way that you can perform the safety function with that individual. Under 2 years of age, individuals who can't remove the face covering without assistance, so that might be someone with a physical disability, it might be still younger kids over the age of 2. And hearing impaired, I understand that there are masks, clear masks that are made for that purpose, for people who read lips or communicate that way. So even though we are allowed now to engage in gatherings of up to 250 people, you need to remember that social distancing is still in place. So even if it doesn't mean that just because we can now have larger gatherings that we can shove people into a room the way we used to. I use the word shove. You know, we used to all gather closely, right? We used to go to weddings. We used to go to religious services. We used to go to meetings and conventions without ever thinking about how close the person was next to us. So now we really need to. So as you start to open up more, try to keep keep things virtually if you can, but if you can't, or if you don't want to for some specific reason, remember social distancing requirements. So getting a lot of questions in the last couple of weeks around travel. So I'll start with business travel first, but personal travel is also a very big question. Remember, under OSHA, you as the employer remain responsible for providing a safe working environment. So if you are going to send people out on business travel, you really need to think this through. Is it necessary? Where are they going? Contact the client or customer. Find out what that client or customer is doing around safety. If they're doing nothing, you probably don't want to send your employee there. If they're doing everything they're supposed to be doing around masks and social distancing and hand washing, you might feel better about it. But how are they getting there? Are they getting there on a plane that might be packed? Is that really a good idea? Are they driving alone in their car and it's an hour or two drive, so they don't have to stop? That's a lot different than going on a plane with 100 other people who may or may not be infected. But this is a big one that we've been getting questions about, okay? So you're hearing several states have instituted quarantines upon return from hotspot areas. So we heard previously Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey had instituted quarantines. Just in the last week, Pennsylvania also instituted their own quarantine. Now, if you look at the language that the various states have used around their quarantine, New York issued an executive order. New Jersey issued an advisory. Pennsylvania, it's not entirely clear what it is that they've issued. It appears that they suggest a quarantine, and then they tell individuals they must quarantine if they've come from certain places. I don't know if that's an order or not. I'll just be honest with you. I don't think I've ever said I don't know or we're not sure as much as I have in the last few months during this quarantine period. It's not 100% clear if what Pennsylvania is doing is an order, an advisory, a suggestion. And so that leaves employers wondering exactly what we should do around this. My best suggestion though to you is this is all about safety and potentially about liability, right? We want to keep our employees as safe as we can, but we also want to avoid liability. We don't want employees traveling to these hotspot areas, coming back to the office and infecting our other employees, both from a business standpoint, a personal standpoint, and a liability standpoint. So I suggest that you do start monitoring where your employees are going on vacation. Start asking them, are you going to any of these places? We need to know about it. Should you have them quarantine when they come back? The answer is probably yes, because again, even if the Pennsylvania or the New Jersey advisory around quarantine is not a have to, I still suggest that it's a good guideline for employers to use to say, we did everything we could to keep our workplace as safe as possible, right? If you have a bunch of employees who get sick at your workplace, it's believed that it's because of an employee who traveled back from one of these areas, from one of these hotspots and infected everybody else, and there is a lawsuit or there is a government investigation. Don't you want to say as an employer, we did everything we felt we could have or should have done, including following this advisory from the state around having people self-quarantine? So what do you do with the people when they're quarantining, right? If they're staying home for 2 weeks, does FFCRA apply? It's not 100% clear. FFCRA says that employees get paid if they are staying home under an order from the government. Again, in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, not so clear that this is an order or not. Now, keep in mind that if you pay the FFCRA, the worst thing's going to happen is that you've paid your employee and it's ultimately decided that it doesn't fall under FFCRA, so you've paid out the time. The worst thing that can happen is you're out the money, but also you might not get the tax credit back, right? It's not clear how this is going to play out. The flip side of it is, if you're wrong, if it's not FFCRA, it's not required under FFCRA, or I'm sorry, if the flip side is true and it is required in FFCRA and you didn't pay it, then you could potentially have another problem on your hands. So it's really a weighing of what you're going to do. And then also keep in mind, if you've made the decision FFCRA does not apply, or if the individual has run out of FFCRA time, Keep in mind that that you might have an exempt versus non-exempt employee issue. I mean, most people travel in week-long increments, but a non-exempt employee only has to be paid if the time actually worked. So if that person is home quarantining, they don't have to get paid. An exempt employee has to get paid in any week that they're performing work. So keep that in mind as well. And also, obviously, some of these folks might be able to telework, which would really take all the problems away. Keep in mind also, we did have a question submitted ahead of time. FFCRA is limited. If an employee has already taken their 80 sick hours for one reason, they don't get another 80 hours for another reason. The only way they would get more time is for childcare. The additional 10 weeks is only for childcare purposes. Again, do you have to pay them while quarantining? And you know, some employers may want to pay people regardless. It's really a decision that you have to make. Be consistent to the extent possible. That's the way you get yourself in trouble with regard to discrimination claims, is if you're not consistent. So keep all of that in mind. I would suggest you think about it right now, think about it with high-level management, and you make a decision right now before people start to travel. Let them know what the deal is. Tell them in writing what the deal is going to be. So if they're planning on traveling to South Carolina or Florida, they may want to change their mind based on the guidance that you are giving them. How do you handle non-compliant employees? Again, something to think through ahead of time, something where consistency is really important. If you treat the male employee different than the female employee, the minority employee differently than the Caucasian employee, that's how you get into trouble with regards to a discrimination claim. Communicate your safety policies, have safety policies, train your managers and your employees around the safety policies. Hey, this is what we're going to be doing. This is the screening we're going to do. These are the temperature checks we're going to do. This is the mask wearing. This is the social distancing. And tell people in advance what the consequences are going to be if they don't comply, and then really do it. Some employers are looking at progressive discipline for these issues. Okay, do we have any questions, Kevin?
I think you answered some of these, but again, you know, with the recommendations about the quarantine states, you know, it's kind of up to the employer whether they want to require it. It's not necessarily required at this point. In Pennsylvania, I'm referring to.
Yeah, I mean, I'll reiterate, it's not 100% clear what Pennsylvania is saying. If it doesn't appear to be an order, it appears to be an advisory or a suggestion. But I would say that I still say the err on the side of caution. Again, do everything you can do to keep your workplace as safe as possible.
Yeah, and your point too is that especially if they can work virtually, why not do that if it's possible? But it's the question was, are there any industries exempt from the PSL role? Someone mentioned organizations in healthcare.
That's an interesting question. I have not seen that, but we're happy to look at that further. If you want to shoot a question into hotline, if you're a member, we're happy to look at that for you. I have not seen there being any exceptions.
I haven't seen it either, but that's
although I will say local governments have generally been exempt from all of this stuff, so they probably are exempt, but I have not seen that otherwise.
Okay. Was there any difference between the original mask order and the one that the governor and the Secretary of Health issued last week? I kind of felt like it was a replication, but
the way I read it, and we may get some more FAQs on this to clarify, is that there was a little bit of a relaxation, I felt. Because before we were hearing, unless you're alone in an enclosed office, you really need to be wearing the masks. And this seems to be a little bit more, well, if you can maintain social distancing and you have some partitions up, you know, because a cubicle is not an enclosed office. So it felt a little bit more relaxed to me, but I still think, again, employers can do more. You can always do more if you feel that it's necessary and important for safety reasons.
Well, and I think also the order last week was really also focused on the general public too, in terms of the mask wear requirements.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It was not specific to the workplace.
Yeah. Someone asked a question, which I don't think I heard you answer. If somebody does have to quarantine for 14 days, can they apply for unemployment during that period?
That's a very interesting question. I have not heard an answer to that one way or the other. I'm sure they can apply. I don't know if the state will grant it or not. If the state would consider that some sort of a furlough, then they may very well be able to get unemployment for that time period.
But then they still would have a wait, you know, they still would have to exercise their wait period too.
Yeah, although I don't know if we're still in the is Pennsylvania still waiving the week-long wait period? I'm not sure.
Yeah. But someone said, can you review the
Interesting question,
policy? Yeah, it was. Can you review the policy for work travel? We go to client offices all locally.
Yeah, what my recommendation would be if you're going local, and this is what I'm doing, by the way, as PSO for MEA. So we've started going out and doing some training with our members. And so before the training takes place, someone will contact the member and say, okay, just let me know what you're doing around safety. Are you social distancing? Are you wearing masks? Is there plexiglass? Is that, you know, all those things. And you just want to be comfortable that the place you're sending your employee, again, you have the obligation as the employer to provide a safe workplace, even if that's not your workplace. You want to make sure that you're comfortable that the customer or client where you're sending your folks is doing everything that they should be doing around safety to keep your employees safe.
Perfect. I think that's it. I want to remind everyone that we will send out the recording and the slides from today. And also for MEA members that we are not going to hold the Friday town halls anymore, at least for the near future. But we will incorporate what we discussed there on these Tuesday webinars. Again, and Amy will always be here each week with an update on what's new, because as we know, it changes every week. So anything.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Just remind everybody, you can visit our website. We've got lots of good COVID-19 information there. We've got a model safety and health policy for our members and additional information in the Coronavirus Resource Center. Thank you all very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.